There is a philosopher who proved, to his own satisfaction, that God committed suicide, and then, finding no flaw in the argument, followed. His name was Philipp Mainländer. He published one book, died the next morning, and left behind a cosmology so disturbing that even Nietzsche, who feared almost nothing, refused to engage with it directly. This video follows a single argument to its terminus. The argument is this: the universe exists because God willed his own death, and everything we call reality is the slow disintegration of that divine corpse. Two questions will haunt what follows. First, can a philosophy that concludes in self-annihilation still be called wisdom, or has it crossed into something else entirely? Second, what if Schopenhauer was not pessimistic enough? What if the will is not blind striving, but a calculated march toward nothing? And what if that march is the only mercy the universe has ever offered? Mainländer was born Philipp Batz in 1841 in Offenbach am Main, Dorty. His father was a factory owner. His childhood was comfortable, educated, unremarkable. At 16, he read Schopenhauer's The World as Will and Representation. He later wrote that the experience was like being struck by lightning in a room he had always assumed was open sky. But where Schopenhauer's pessimism produced resignation, a kind of aristocratic withdrawal from the world, Mainländer felt something else. He felt the argument was incomplete. If the will is truly the fundamental substance of reality, and if it produces only suffering, then why does it persist? Why does it not turn against itself? Schopenhauer's answer was that the will is blind. It strives without purpose, without direction, without end. Mainländer thought this was evasion, dressed as debt. He spent years working in a bank in Naples, then in a textile factory, all while composing his system in notebooks. He moved through the world like someone already absent from it. In 1876, at age 34, he completed Die Philosophie der Erlösung, the philosophy of redemption. He sent the manuscript to a publisher and waited. On April 1, 1876, the printed copies arrived at his home. On April 2nd, he stacked them beneath a rope and hanged himself. The consistency is what unsettled. This was not despair. Read the final pages of the Erlösung, and you will find no anguish, no cry for help. You will find a man who believed he had solved a problem and was now calmly implementing the solution. That distinction matters. If Mainländer's death was pathology, we can dismiss him. If it was logic, if the death followed from the argument the way a conclusion follows from premises, then we have a different problem entirely. So what does the argument actually say? Let us enter it at the point where Mainländer breaks from his teacher. Schopenhauer posited a single, unified will underlying all phenomena. Mainländer says, no, there was once a unity, call it God. But that unity no longer exists. It shattered itself, deliberately. Why would God destroy himself? Mainländer's answer is startling in its simplicity. God wanted what he could not have while existing. Non-being, absolute nothingness. But a simple God, a pure unity, cannot simply cease. Unity has no internal differentiation, no mechanism of decay. To die, God first had to become multiple. He had to become a world. This is the core thesis. The universe, all of it, every atom, every thought, every living thing, is God in the process of dying. Creation is not an act of love. It is a suicide method. Think about what that means. Every law of physics, every chemical reaction, every biological process, all of it is the machinery of divine self-annihilation, running exactly as intended. Mainländer calls this the cosmological law of entropy. Decades, note, before thermodynamics would formalize the concept. The universe moves from order to disorder, from being to non-being. This is not decay. It is purpose. You might object, this is mythology, not philosophy. A creation story wearing Kantian clothes. But Mainländer anticipated that objection. He writes in the Erlösung, God is the transcendent concept that explains the transition from unity to multiplicity. It is not a being I ask you to worship. It is a logical necessity I ask you to think. The argument stripped bare. Something unified became something multiple. Multiplicity decays. Therefore, the origin willed its own dissolution through fragmentation. The logic is not irrational. That is precisely what makes it terrifying. And here Mainländer introduces his central correction to Schopenhauer. The fundamental drive of reality is not the will to live. It is the will to death. The will to death. Let us be precise about what Mainländer means, because it is easy to mishear this as adolescent nihilism. It is not. For Schopenhauer, the will to live is the thing that traps us. It drives us to reproduce, to consume, to build, all of which produces suffering. The solution is denial of the will, asceticism, art, compassion. Mainländer says this is incoherent. You cannot deny the will from within the will. A river cannot flow upstream by wishing. If the will truly drives everything, then denial is just another of its masks. But, and here is the turn, what if the will is not oriented toward life at all? What if what looks like the will to live is actually the will to death wearing a temporary disguise? Consider, every organism that lives also dies. Every structure that forms also decays. Every star that ignites is burning toward its own extinction. What if life is not opposed to death, but is its instrument? Mainländer writes, life is the detour to death. It is the means by which the original unity achieves the non-being it desired, but could not reach directly. This is why reproduction exists. Not to perpetuate life, but to accelerate fragmentation. Each new individual is another fragment of God moving independently toward its own cessation. Can you feel the vertigo of this? It means your desire to live, your survival instinct, your love for your children. All of it serves dissolution. You are not resisting entropy. You are conducting it. Now you might ask, is this not just thermodynamics with a theological veneer? Entropy dressed in metaphysics? The objection is fair, but it misses something crucial. Thermodynamics describes. Mainländer explains. He is not saying the universe happens to run down. He is saying it was designed to run down. The running down is the point. The difference between a universe that decays accidentally and one that decays on purpose is the difference between tragedy and mercy. Mainländer insists it is mercy. Mercy? Yes, because if existence is suffering, and here he agrees with Schopenhauer and the Buddha, then a universe structured for dissolution is a universe structured for the cessation of suffering. Ask yourself honestly, does this feel like madness, or does it feel like something you've quietly suspected and never dared to formalize? What follows from this cosmology? Here, Mainländer surprises, because his ethics are not what you would expect from a philosopher of depth. They are remarkably gentle. If all beings are fragments of the same dying God, then compassion is not charity. It is recognition. The suffering of another is your own suffering, viewed from a slightly different angle of disintegration. Mainländer advocates for what he calls virginity of the spirit, not asceticism imposed from above, but a natural waning of desire as one approaches the truth. The will weakens. One lets it weaken. He even argues for political reform, for socialism, for the alleviation of material suffering. This seems contradictory. If death is the goal, why reduce suffering along the way? His answer: because a suffering being clings to life more desperately. Pain makes the organism grip tighter. Reduce the suffering, and the will relaxes its hold naturally. We soon. Comfort, paradoxically, hastens the end. This is perhaps the most unsettling inversion in all of philosophy. Kindness as an instrument of annihilation. Mercy as a technique of cosmic euthanasia. Right. And yet, can you honestly say it is wrong? When a hospice nurse eases pain, knowing the patient will die, do we call that cruelty? Or do we call it the deepest form of love available in a finite world? Mainländer extends this analogy to the cosmos itself. The universe is a hospice. God is the patient. We are the nurses. And the task is not to cure. It is to ease the passage. Now, does this make Mainländer a nihilist? The word gets thrown at him, but it does not stick. A nihilist says nothing matters. Mainländer says everything matters as the instrument of a single sacred task. There is meaning in his system. There is direction. There is even something like hope, though hope for nothingness is a strange species of hope. He calls it redemption. Redemption not from sin, redemption from being. The only salvation that this philosophy recognizes is the salvation of finally not existing. And it promises that this salvation is guaranteed by the structure of reality itself. Why has no one heard of Mainländer? But he published in the same decade as Nietzsche's early work. His system is as rigorous as anything in late German idealism. And yet, silence. Part of the reason is obvious. A philosopher who kills himself on the day of publication does not cultivate disciples. There is no school, no circle, no tradition to carry the work forward. But there is a deeper reason. Mainländer's philosophy is dangerous in a way that most pessimism is not. Schopenhauer makes you melancholy. Mainländer makes you wonder if melancholy is insight. Nietzsche knew of him. In an unpublished note from 1876, he refers to Mainländer dismissively as a sentimental weakling. But Nietzsche's entire project, the essay, the Amor Fati, the Eternal Return, reads differently once you know what he was saying no to. The will to power as a response to the will to death. Nietzsche's entire affirmation philosophy may be a counterspell cast against this one obscure book. The anxiety of influence runs deep when the influence argues for extinction. Borges, who read everything, mentions Mainländer in a footnote. Cioran circled his ideas without citing him. The philosophy of redemption became a ghost in the machine of European thought, unacknowledged but structurally present. In the 21st century, when climate science tells us that systems run down, when physicists describe heat death as inevitable, when the young report, feeling that the future is already foreclosed, Mainländer's cosmos feels less like metaphysics and more like weather report. But here's where we must be careful. To say Mainländer was prescient is not to say he was right. The question of whether his argument is valid remains open, and it is not a question we can afford to leave unexamined. Where does the argument fail if it fails? The weakest point is the initial premise, that unity once existed and chose dissolution. This is asserted, not demonstrated. Mainländer treats it as a regulative idea in the Kantian sense, a necessary assumption for the system to work. But is that not what every metaphysics does? Hegel begins with the absolute. Schopenhauer begins with the will. No first principle can prove itself without circularity. Mainländer is no more guilty of this than any of them. The stronger objection is ethical. If this philosophy is true, does it oblige anything? Mainländer said no. That understanding the will to death does not require hastening it. The knowledge, he wrote, should produce complete calm. But his own biography undermines this. Or does it? Perhaps his death was not a failure of his ethics, but the completion of his epistemology. He knew, and knowing, he acted. Whether that is courage or catastrophe depends on whether you believe he was right. Let us return to the two questions we began with. Can a philosophy that concludes in self-annihilation still be called wisdom? Mainländer would say that it is the only philosophy worthy of the name, because it alone does not flinch from its own conclusions. And the second question, whether Schopenhauer was not pessimistic enough, whether the will moves not blindly but deliberately toward nothing. Mainländer's answer is that pessimism without direction is sentimental. True, pessimism is a cosmology. It is structure. It has a destination. Whether you accept or reject this system, you cannot unhear it. The will to death is now a thought you have thought. And Mainländer would say that is enough, that the thought itself is a small act of dissolution, one more fracture in the unity that once was. He saw what we still prefer to look away from, that the universe keeps its only promise in the dark.